Welcome back to UK Homicide. The brutal murder of Daniel Morgan is one of the most infamous unsolved cases in British criminal history. Morgan, a private investigator from London, was murdered in 1987, and his case has been marked by a series of botched investigations, police corruption, conspiracy stories, and multiple failed attempts to bring those responsible to justice. Daniel Morgan was a 37-year-old private investigator working in the London area. He was known for his involvement in investigating fraud, corruption, and other criminal activities. He co-owned a detective agency called Southern Investigations with his business partner, Jonathan Rees, who would later become a central figure in the case. Morgan was not just a private investigator. He had significant knowledge about the underworld and had information that implicated corrupt police officers and others involved in illegal activities. On March 10, 1987, a passerby found Daniel Morgan murdered in the car park of the Golden Lion Hotel in Sydenham, South London. He had been struck with an axe, which was still embedded in his head. The brutality of the murder and the location, a well-lit car park in a busy area, suggested a premeditated and targeted attack. The initial investigation was marred by errors and failures, including issues securing the crime scene, mishandling key evidence, and an apparent lack of urgency in following up on leads. 5 possible single motives were identified, with a sixth being a combination. Firstly, we have his significant knowledge and active investigation into dishonest police officers. Could they have silenced him to prevent the exposure of their secrets? Secondly, Jonathan Rees, who co-owned the private investigation agency with Morgan, was involved. There were documented reports of tension between the two men, particularly over business disagreements and personal rivalries. Is it viable that a business dispute or personal fallout could have escalated into violence, especially if Morgan was planning to leave the partnership or expose unethical practices? Revenge by criminal figures is the third theory. He had investigated cases of organized crime, which would have put him in direct conflict with dangerous criminal figures. Some believe that the murder was an act to remove any threat to their operations. The nature of such a brutal public murder suggests a targeted, calculated move. Number 4 is Morgan's investigation into the links between the police and criminal gangs. This included him uncovering evidence that some officers directly provided information and services to criminals. There has been much speculation that officers were either involved in the murder itself or were actively involved in obstructing the investigation. In the years following the murder, several police officers were indeed suspected and investigated. At number 5 is a less widely accepted theory that Morgan was the victim of mistaken identity. Given the involvement of various individuals in the world of crime and private investigations, could someone else have been the intended target, and he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was his death simply collateral damage? Final theory of motive combines business, corruption, and revenge. Likely, the motive for Morgan's murder was not due to a single factor, but a combination of issues involving business rivalry, the investigation of corrupt police, and the desire to silence him to prevent him from uncovering more criminal activity. His enemies within the world of private investigations, the police, and the criminal underworld would suggest that multiple motives could have come together to make his death an attractive option for those wanting to protect their interests. Morgan's murder saw no less than 5 police investigations. These investigations were plagued by police corruption, mishandled evidence, and legal failures. So let's look at each one. The first investigation began immediately after the murder in 1987 and was led by the Metropolitan or Met Police. The crime scene was incorrectly secured, and crucial evidence may have been tampered with. Jonathan Rees, Morgan's business partner, was arrested but quickly released, and early suspicions were voiced about police corruption and interference. Investigation 2, which ran from 1988 to 1989, was conducted by Hampshire Police to avoid any conflicts of interest. It uncovered further evidence of corruption, including officers leaking information to suspects. In an unexpected twist, Detective Sergeant Sid Fillery, who was initially assigned to Morgan's case, was found to have connections with the initial suspects and joined Jonathan Rees at Southern Investigations after leaving the force. 10 years later, in 1998, the focus turned to getting witness testimony against Jonathan Rees and ex-DS Sid Fillery. As a result, it was nicknamed Investigation Supergrass. Number 4, which started in 2002 and lasted 4 years, focused on Rees' criminal network, corrupt police officers, and journalists. Evidence uncovered his involvement with the news of the world, which included phone hacking and illegal surveillance. Despite strong suspicions, no conclusive evidence linked him to the murder. But in early 2000, he was convicted of planting drugs on an innocent woman. So he's not exactly a pillar of society. The fifth 2008 investigation, which cost an estimated £30 million, seemed to give this case the break it needed. Rees, Fillery, and 3 other men were arrested for murder.
3 policemen and 2 other people have been arrested by officers investigating the murder of a private detective in London.
However, in another unbelievable blow to Morgan's family, the witness testimonies the prosecution relied on were deemed unreliable, and crucial evidence was withheld from the defense. Therefore, the judge ruled that a fair trial was impossible, and charges against all 5 suspects were dropped. In a BBC interview with Rees, he stated that he did not consider any issue in exchanging information and socializing with police officers and those investigating Morgan's murder.
Did you kill Daniel?
No,
Did you arrange his killing? Did you arrange his murder?
For what motive? What motive? No,
Well,
I didn't like. Daniel was my friend. People keep talking about fractions between us. There wasn't any. Daniel was
there were no arguments between you.
Yeah, it's a small, tight business working on a tight budget, and Daniel was absolutely brilliant at what he did as a bailiff, and he was ruthless about that, and he earned me a lot, or earned the firm a lot of money. It was a partnership, and so the more he brings in, the more I bring in, the more profits we get to share at the end of the year, and it worked well. So him dying caused me a massive amount of grief, financially and business-wise, because the partnership ceased to exist.
But it wasn't a great idea, was it, to put Sid Fillery, your friend from the police, into Daniel's job after his death?
It's not stepping into dead man's shoes.
Well, that wasn't the phrase I used, but that's a phrase you
Well, no, well, I'm telling you, that's what's in the report, and that's what people have said in their statements. Daniel died in March. It was 18 months, nearly 2 years later, before I invited Sid to come and join us. I'd been arrested by Hampshire. So now I was banished on bail up to South Yorkshire, and had no one to run the office.
In summary, 5 investigations covering the 31 years between 1987 and 2008 uncovered vast evidence of corruption, collusion, speculation, and hearsay. Still, they failed to bring about a conviction for Morgan's murder or the rampant police corruption. As a result, the UK government set up the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel to examine police and investigator corruption, the role of the media in obstructing justice, and institutional failures in police accountability, honesty, and transparency. The Met Police were required to cooperate fully. Instead, they purposefully delayed access to key documents, slowing the panel's work. After 8 years of investigation, the panel released a 1,000-page report in June 2021. Its key conclusions were: 1. The police were institutionally corrupt, with cover-ups, obstruction, and secrecy being prioritized over any genuine attempt to solve Morgan's murder. 2. Senior officers focused more on protecting their image than finding the killers. Their public statements were often intentionally misleading and downplayed corruption. 3. The media and corrupt private investigators, particularly the News of the World, Jonathan Rees, and some officers, worked hand in glove to obtain, exchange, cover up, and receive payment for illegally obtained information. 4. The Home Office was criticized for ignoring corruption warnings, and it highlighted that multiple UK governments had had a chance to launch a public inquiry but chose not to. In the aftermath of this report, and 36 years after Morgan's murder, police admitted to some failings. Daniel's brother rejected this admission, saying he did not accept that apology and, quote, I think we've heard enough apologies. What they've said doesn't give us grounds for confidence that they can approach the follow-up work that's clearly required from a document with such gravity. He felt vindicated in his long struggle to find answers and hold people accountable.
With the panel, this is the state's verdict on itself, not my verdict. And I may have differences of opinion with the panel, or even strong differences of opinion with the conclusions they reach, but it has much more impact than anything I can say. I'm hoping, clearly, obviously hoping that I will be vindicated, for having pursued this for so long.
However, Commissioner Cressida Dick, who was the Met Police chief at the time, rejected the label of being, quote, institutionally corrupt. In this clip, she refers to 6 investigations, not 5, but has likely included a panel in her tally.
So I don't believe we are institutionally corrupt. No, I don't accept that. I have the deepest feelings for Daniel Morgan's family. They have shown extraordinary grit and determination and courage. And yesterday I apologised again to them for our failings and the fact that we have not brought anybody to justice, despite 6 investigations and countless other reviews and pieces of work. And for the fact that in so doing and along the way we have clearly, we the Met, my force of which I'm very proud to be the Commissioner, we have caused them extra anguish. But I don't accept that we are institutionally corrupt, no.
A parallel investigation called Levson focused on Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation and its influence on not only Morgan's murder, but many others. This included Millie Dowler, whose voicemail messages were listened to and deleted, giving her family hope that she was still alive and could access her phone.
Mark Lewis is the lawyer for the family of 13-year-old Millie Dowler, who was murdered in 2002.
This is a campaign for proper standards in the press, not intrusion into people's life.
When Millie went missing, a private investigator working for the News of the World hacked into her phone. And he not only listened to her voicemail, but he deleted messages, clearing space for more calls. Millie's family, seeing this phone activity, were given false hope that their little girl was still alive.
This caused UK-wide revulsion. It uncovered widespread indiscriminate phone hacking, journalist access to confidential documents, witness intimidation, smear campaigns, misleading headlines, and secret money transfers. Murdoch did attempt an apology.
The face of Rupert Murdoch after he apologised privately and publicly to the family of Millie Dowler.
I was appalled the night I would have happened. I'm crying and I apologised and I have nothing further to say.
This apology would be undone by a secret recording of him 2 years later, in which he appeared to have no remorse.
I mean, it's a disgrace. 2 years later. It's totally ungodly. I mean, the idea that the cops have saying, you kick you out of bed, your families at 6 in the morning. It's unbelievable. Why the police behaving this way? It's the biggest inquiry ever. Well, it makes it nothing. And now they're arresting their own who never even took money.
Some of Rupert and James Murdoch's responses during this streamed inquiry were widely viewed as bizarre.
I would just like to say one sentence. This is the most humble day of my life. Thank you. And this is not an excuse. Maybe it's an explanation of my laxity. The News of the World is less than 1% of our company. I employ 53,000 people around the world who are proud and great and ethical and distinguished people, professionals in their life. And perhaps I'm spread watching and appointing people whom I trust.
This scandal led to the shutting down of the News of the World and the prosecution of journalists and investigators, which finally sounds like good news. However, the UK government inexplicably cancelled the UK-wide demands for a Levson Part 2, citing a lack of public interest. As of May 2023, several notable developments have taken place. The Metropolitan Police found previously undisclosed documents related to the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel's investigation in a locked cabinet within New Scotland Yard.
I didn't obstruct their work. I set out with my team, who were well-resourced, to ensure that we gave the panel maximum cooperation and that we did full disclosure as quickly as we could.
In July 2023, the Met Police finally acknowledged significant failings. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley met with the Morgan family to accept responsibility for these shortcomings and commit to addressing corruption within the force. So what can we ultimately conclude after all these investigations, inquiries, and panels? Well, we say that with almost certainty. Morgan was going to expose something or someone. Southern Investigations was involved in police bribery and illegal information gathering. Officers were engaged in corruption and active cover-up, and there was even speculation of their direct involvement in the murder. The press was complicit in the cover-up, using illegal methods and redirection. The notorious unsolved murder of Daniel Morgan points to a calculated, targeted attack designed to send a message. The subsequent years uncovered a web of corruption and rot within some British institutions, which eroded public trust in the police, legal systems, investigators, and the media. This murder serves as a not-to-be-forgotten example of how corruption can interfere with justice, especially when there is seemingly no desire to expose, address, and punish years of systemic failure, collusion, complicity, and knowledge. Thank you for listening to Daniel's story. He is often overlooked in favor of a headline or report. What do you think of this case, and what are the many remaining questions and theories? Until next time, take care and stay safe.